Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 316 of the Fun with Cars Motorsports Podcast, or episode 3 of 2022. I'm Robin Warner, and today I'm joined by the man who needs to explain to me what 11s are, Christopher Roche. Chris, what are 11s?
Oh, mate,
it sounds like something I should know about.
It's a snack. It's food. It's food you eat at 11 o'clock in the morning.
With tea, I believe.
You can have it with tea if you wish. It's not tea time.
How could you not have it with tea? Tea is fantastic. What? So are all English hobbits, do they have like noonsies and late breakfast and all these other things as well? How many meals a day do you guys have?
As many as possible.
It is Wednesday afternoon, March 2nd, and Chris and I are going to talk about the just completed testing that happened in Barcelona, as well as the first Indycar race. And yes, there's definitely some news to talk about as well. Chris, where would you like to start?
Oh, let's talk about those 3 days in Barcelona. It was a lot of fun. We got to see, the best look we've had yet of the 22 cars, the 2022 cars, that is. There are 10 cars, and for anyone that's confused. And so the Red Bull was pretty striking. It's as you were alluding to in the last podcast, Adrian Newey and his boys have been busy, and they've certainly got some unique interpretations of the rules and some pretty interesting features on their car. Obviously, we had speculated about Alfa Romeo's presence, but they were there in a camouflage car.
Which is so odd. I don't know why you'd bother with the camouflage. What are they hiding and from whom?
Well, you saw the new livery this week, right? I mean, it is different, but not massively so. So a bit of pointless, I think.
Yeah.
So we had 3 days. The reliability in general was decent, I would say. I've got the order of the teams here with the most number of laps. So Ferrari topped the lap count with 439. Then it was Mercedes, McLaren and Red Bull and Williams, all in the sort of the mid to high 300s. AlphaTauri, Aston Martin did about 300 laps. Alpine was down at 266. Alfa Romeo at 175, and Haas bottom of the table with 160 laps. So definitely the last three had some reliability issues over the course of the 3 days. And speed-wise, Mercedes topped the times, but there were different tyre compounds being run. So interesting.
And we don't know fuel loads and how aggressive they were with settings, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Definitely. Gary Anderson, the former technical director at Jordan Grand Prix, amongst others, put together an interesting tyre adjusted order. So he reckons, and again, you're right, he also makes the claim they don't know the fuel loads, but right now he thinks the pecking order is Ferrari, Red Bull, McLaren, Mercedes, AlphaTauri, Aston Martin, Alpine, Williams, Haas, and Alfa Romeo. So we could have Ferrari back at the sharp end.
They put Haas ahead of Alfa Romeo, huh?
Well, I think you're splitting hairs.
That's fascinating. I mean, maybe for the laps that it keeps running.
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, there were some interesting aerodynamic issues with these new ground effect cars, and porpoising was the word of the test. So essentially, the cars are bouncing down the main straight at Barcelona because the ground effect is applied, and the cars get sucked down, and then it loses that ground effect because of a stall, and then it bounces back up again, and the cycle repeats. So there's some great video footage of particularly the Ferrari just bouncing up and down the main straight. And Alfa Romeo seemed to be one of the teams most affected. I mean, all of the teams were affected to some extent, but Alfa Romeo and Ferrari seem to have some of the worst issues. And so the teams are going to have to try and figure out how to solve that. It might actually be inherent in the regulations, the definition of the tunnels and the ride height of the vehicles and so on and so forth. But yeah, that's something that has to be resolved.
Real quick, let's just elaborate on that just a little bit further. So the car is getting sucked down almost too effectively to the point that it's basically bottoming out the floor of the car, which takes all the air away from the tunnels. And once the air is gone, the downforce is gone, and the car just pops right back up under its own springs, And then once it pops back up, there's all that air again to start forcing the car down again, and that's how the cycle repeats itself. So it's this weird, like, it's almost the downforce is too effective too quickly. And is there a way to get the downforce to kind of find its maximum while you still have some ride height that it can maintain itself? And that's how you avoid porpoising. But the simplest way to do that is to increase the ride height of the car, and doing that takes away a lot of the effectiveness of the downforce in the first place. So it's this real classic catch-22 in terms of aerodynamic conundrums.
Yeah, and I guess it's not something that could be replicated easily in the wind tunnel, because they have to run the cars at a specific ride height, and they can't lower it down to a point where it's touching the belt. Otherwise, you end up damaging both the belt itself of the tunnel, the rolling road tunnel, and the model of the car. So it's hard to replicate in the wind tunnel. I guess they're obviously struggling to also simulate it in the computational fluid dynamics modeling they're doing. So it's something that, good old-fashioned track time is necessary to figure out the right balance. Whether there's things you can do with the rest of the floor to try and mitigate the issue, or finding the right spring rates. Obviously, if you stiffen the springing of the car, that may help to a certain degree, but then you might be too stiff for other parts of the track. So I'm sure the F1 teams are hard at work on it, and we'll probably see some improvement in Bahrain and throughout the season.
Yeah, absolutely. So Red Bull has already said that they're going to have quite different looking car already for the next test. Mm-hmm. And other people have said, updates are coming, but I think Red Bull had the biggest claim of significant changes coming. What were the main takeaways from this first test that you saw? I certainly I'll just quickly say that it certainly seems like Ferrari seems to be in a good place. Mercedes still seems to have its ducks in a row. But I still don't read too much into it just yet. Yeah,
so you're right. I think the first iteration of the 22 cars were what were out in Barcelona, and the expectation is there'll be quite a few updates for Bahrain, I guess, as well as Red Bull. Mercedes are planning to bring a pretty sizable upgrade too. So I think, the top four teams, Ferrari, Mercedes, McLaren and Red Bull, all look pretty close. I think both McLaren and Ferrari do look strong. So hopefully we'll be in a situation where we could have four potential teams winning races at the start of the season, which would be...
That'd be brilliant.
Fantastic. Red Bull had some pretty significant gearbox issues on the Thursday. So that could be an issue. If they are having trouble with reliability, that could obviously limit their ability to challenge early in the season, which could be very costly. But I don't know if how long that will take to resolve, or if they think it was a manufacturing issue or inherent design issue. But yeah, it does look like those top four are gonna be competitive with each other, and then you've got quite an interesting midfield battle with, I think, certainly Aston Martin, AlphaTauri, and potentially Alpine. Alpine were running really conservatively on their engine modes. They weren't using DRS, and yet
still had engine trouble.
Well, it was a hydraulic issue apparently. It wasn't actually one of the engines that blew up on Friday. It was something else that caused all the smoke and flame. So still not great.
Smoke and flame is kind of a no matter what. But yeah, fair.
So yeah, it does look like you've got your three stragglers, sort of three midfield teams at the moment, and four, that are going to be competitive. So it does bode well for a really exciting season. I think the other interesting thing that happened during the test on Friday after lunch, they artificially watered the surface of the track so Pirelli could get some data on their wet weather tyres. It wasn't entirely effective. They spent, I guess, quite some time dousing the whole track surface, and then within 3 laps the track was so dry that they all had to switch to inters. Only Daniel Ricciardo was able to do any meaningful wet weather tyre running before the track was too dry.
I mean, what were they expecting? Rain continuously falls as they're driving. That's what makes a wet track. It's not. I mean, whenever rain has happened and it's past tense, it's not a wet track. It's a drying track, and it's just a matter of how quickly it will dry. So I can't be the only one that thought of this.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. It does remind me of one of Bernie Ecclestone's crazier suggestions, though, that they fit all the tracks with sprinkler systems so they could randomise the weather during the course of a dull race and just turn the sprinklers on for a few laps to wet the track and then turn them off again. Fortunately, that wasn't implemented. We just got DRS instead. And,
it'd be great as well is if they, instead of racetracks, they were just in these 20-foot by 20-foot rings with 3 levels of ropes around them. And instead of cars, the drivers just wore interesting spandex suits and came up with crazy names, and then they just wrestled each other. And it was fake, but kind of entertainment. I mean, that would be super cool. And I feel like there might be something similar to that somewhere. I become such an old curmudgeon when it comes to that. Don't change. That change is bad. But the beauty of racing is it's so simple. Whoever's fastest wins. That is the end of it. The more complexity you add, the more that gets sullied or watered down, you could say, if you pardon the pun.
I totally agree. So let's talk about Pierre Gasly for a second, because a lot of people fancy the AlphaTauri. They think it looks a pretty good, well-executed car. And Gasly had a strong season last year. And a lot of people are up in arms that he wasn't considered for the Red Bull drive again this season. But one of the things that Gasly managed to do during the test was crash the car again. Now, if those of us who recall his one season at Red Bull will all remember that he crashed the Red Bull in testing prior to the start of the season, which sort of got him off on the wrong foot. And he's repeated the feat here. He crashed it badly enough that Tsunoda, who was scheduled to go out on the Friday afternoon, wasn't able to run in the car at all. They basically had to finish the test early. I mean, that's not great, is it? I mean, if he really wants to be considered as a contender for a top team in this era of such strong driver lineup, I mean, we've got such riches in terms of young, really exciting drivers, and Gasly could arguably be classified as one of those. But you got to stop making these stupid mistakes. And I mean, what was he thinking?
I think this is something we can look back at if we get a third away into the season and he's underperforming compared to last year. But I don't know. I don't think there's too much to draw from this just yet. Brand new car, behaves a different way, makes downforce a different way. There's enough new going on that...
Oh, who else crashed then? Anyone else crashed?
That's not the... I mean, well, I'm sure lots of people crashed. They crashed. They crashed after a night of partying, and they just had to crash.
I mean,
crashes happen. I guess your point is you're absolutely right. I don't know. I just don't think there's too much to read into it yet. Now, if he crashes again at the Bahrain test, maybe that's a little bit more ominous.
I guess, to me, it's why he'll never be in the running for another top-line seat. I mean, look at George Russell. So Russell, did his apprenticeship at Williams, had a one-off race at Mercedes, should have won that race in his one chance prior to this season. He's now been promoted to the big boy team, and he was polished and flawless. He was on the pace, kept Lewis honest, had some great press interviews, spoke very eloquently about the car and the performance and his expectations for the season. Didn't put a foot wrong. That's why he is touted as a potential future world champion. Right, and in the same bracket as people like Lando and Charles. But Gasly just keeps doing these daft things. And so that's why I think, his big chance has come and gone. He probably won't have another one. Just a little rant on Gasly. Anyway, anything else on testing, do you think?
Testing woes were compounded for Haas when, in the middle of it, they had to take their title sponsor off their car. The reason is nothing short of a country invading another. And it's so incredible to see in our little niche micro world of Formula One how we have the connection to world geopolitics playing out in the sport. it's so odd to me that it's the one American-owned team with this huge primary Russian sponsorship and indeed a Russian driver that now is just turned into this whole very messy situation. So real quick, we'll just open it by saying, the FIA came out with a statement. The FIA Formula One World Championship visits countries all over the world with a positive vision to unite people, bringing nations together. We are watching the developments in Ukraine with sadness and shock and hope for a swift and peaceful resolution to the present situation. On Thursday evening, and this was last Thursday now, Formula One, the FIA, and the teams discussed the position of our sport, and the conclusion is, including the view of all relevant stakeholders, that it is impossible to hold the Russian Grand Prix in the current circumstances. So, Russia is likely out, but it's not confirmed yet. And then there was the issue of Russian drivers. But let's first talk about your initial reactions to Formula One's reaction to what's going on in Russia and Ukraine.
Yeah, so you touched on Haas's predicament. I think Haas has to be applauded for the speediness of their rejection of their sponsor. That's a Russian conglomerate. So they were not interested in representing that sponsor anymore. So took the livery, all the decals, all the colour scheme that was associated with the sponsor, took that off the car. They ran in the plain white colours, just with Haas and a couple of other sponsors' logos on the car. So, that's obviously going to cost them some money. But I think Gene Haas and his organisation need to be applauded for that initiative. I think it's the right thing to do, so good on them. And let's hope they find some replacement sponsors soon. I think, that there were a number of drivers. I think Vettel was the leading spokesperson, really, saying that he wasn't going to race in Russia in the existing circumstances. And I think that was also very brave. And I think it's the right decision not planning on going to Russia this year, if indeed nothing changes and that's what happens. I think that's absolutely the right thing. So, pleased that the right decisions are being made there. But I think with the drivers, it's a bit more. I have a slightly trickier thought there. But do you want to clarify what that position is right now, as it stands?
So we're in the situation where what is Formula One's connection to Russia going to be? What will and will not be tolerated? And obviously, Russian money plays a big role in that. And there is something I actually want to say about that before we get into the driving situation, because that is a little messier. There was this meeting, and there was huge publicity behind this big meeting where Vladimir Putin had his oligarchs show up and listen to him talking about the circumstances. And I believe the timing of this was immediately before the initial invasion. Nikita Mazepin's dad was in that room. And he's the one that owns the company that Haas had sponsored. So that is kind of a sharp reminder, stark, sharp reminder of how big money is connected throughout the world, and in how Formula One obviously deals with a lot of big money and how those things are connected. So that's, to me, a very telling and kind of formidable, that stuck with me, I guess is what I'm trying to say. That's it's kind of a weird thing to take in. But anyway, so now you have the question of, will the FIA allow Russian drivers to compete in FIA-sanctioned events? And basically, as I understand it, what the FIA has determined is that, similar to the Olympic Committee has done, Russian drivers can compete in FIA-sanctioned events, but not under Russian national flag. They get like a different FIA-branded flag or nationality to run under. But there's obviously still a lot of gray areas of how that's actually going to happen, especially with all the sanctionings coming in place. And then, again, with Nikita Mazepin specifically, it's way more complicated than what nationality, quote-unquote, are you racing under.
Yeah, and to add to that, the the UK has announced they won't allow Russian drivers to race in any of their series, including the British Grand Prix. So
right.
If Nikita keeps his seat at Haas, he won't be in the British Grand Prix based on that policy as it stands. So this is a bit muddier because, first of all, the Olympic situation is because of the state-sponsored doping of Russian athletes, and that special situation was developed to allow clean athletes from Russia to compete, which I think we all get behind, right? Why should you punish everyone if they can prove and they abide by all the testing protocols? Why not allow them to compete under the Russian Olympic Federation banner or whatever they call it? I didn't have a problem with that, but this is a different situation. This is about penalising individuals based on what their state is doing, and so in general, I would say I'm not comfortable with that. I don't see why Russian racing drivers that are, they may not live in Russia, they certainly may not support Putin or the war in Ukraine, why they should necessarily be punished. I think that's a much more complicated question, and we need to think very deeply about how we move forward on that, because you could, different people from different parts of the world with different political persuasions might take issue with drivers of all sorts of nationalities. We might end up with a grid limited by only like a dozen countries that we all feel comfortable with. I mean, that's not really where we want to go, is it?
Or Formula One would be a bunch of Swiss drivers because they claim neutrality.
Right.
Always.
Well, even the Swiss are slightly controversial. They've been known to harbour people's...
I'm saying this in jest because there's plenty... yeah.
So that's the point, isn't it? You could argue about every country
but hold on. People. I mean, Chris, just so you're aware, I treat you as nicely as I'm willing to based on what Boris Johnson has said that day. Just so you're aware. So,
oh, good. And I'm going to hold you accountable by whatever Biden is saying. Apparently, he's supporting the Iranians based on his State of the Union address last night. But we'll move on.
but we digress. Yeah.
So that's
and
much
Lord
more
knows I would not want to be characterized by certain administrations of recent past. So exactly. There are. You're absolutely right. And then furthermore, I'm actually I'm personally through my wife friends with someone born in Russia, very, very nice person. Yeah. And just like anywhere in the world, the vast majority of Russian people are good, nice people.
And a lot of Russians are appalled at the actions of their government and country and military, and a lot of them are actually trying to get out of the country. So that's a different podcast, isn't it? Let's not go down there.
Yeah, We're already flirting with the edge here, but we're kind of forced to because it's affecting the sport of Formula One as much as it is.
But right now we have one driver from Russia on the grid. He's not that popular. He's not that good. So I think if he disappears, no one's going to be particularly sad, especially as he has only really got the drive because of his dad, and how he's got to that point financially is questionable. So I think I won't be very sad, and I won't shed too many tears if Nikita gets replaced. But if that happened to be with a really well qualified Russian driver, I wouldn't necessarily be opposed with that if I felt he was deserving of the drive. That's really my conclusion. I don't know what you think.
If Lewis Hamilton was Russian, this would be a more difficult conversation to have than Nikita Mazepin. At the same time, everything you just said about Russian people in general and people of the nationalities versus the governments of the nationalities is absolutely true. But Nikita, as I stated just a couple of moments ago, is a lot closer than usual to those governments. Do you see what I'm getting at? So
absolutely, yeah.
That, I think, is the stickiest part of this situation. You have Russian drivers in the FIA in generally, Formula 1, Formula 2, and on, like all the different FIA classes. But then you have the son of an oligarch in Formula. Do you see what I'm getting at? I'm getting very political here, and I'm trying to minimize that. But that makes it more difficult for me as well. And the fact that you've already, as a team, Haas has already said, well, we can't have the sponsor right now. Well, you have that sponsor because you have that driver. So how is that going to play out?
Yeah. I'm with you. I mean, so let's talk about other recent Russian F1 drivers. We've had Daniel Kvyat. We had Sergei Sirotkin.
Petrov.
Yeah,
Sirotkin, yeah. And
yeah. So I don't think... I don't know how deep their political ties are with Putin and company, but on theoretically, I don't think anyone's really opposed to those drivers. Let's say Kvyat was offered a way back into the sport. I mean, he was a decent peddler.
I believe he's still reserve driver for Ferrari, or simulator driver or something. He's still connected somehow.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I think the point we're making is that they shouldn't automatically be ruled out just on their nationality alone, should we? So there needs to be a deeper investigation into the character and the individual and their links to other parts of their country before that decision's made. Unless
they're found out to be doping, and that case,
yeah.
I don't know exactly how you dope for Formula One, but don't do it. It's not good. It's the point. Don't do it. Let's just, for a slightly less tough conversation part of this to have, who theoretically would replace Nikita were he to be replaced for the entire season? I read a couple articles on that. Seems like one of the leading candidates is actually Antonio Giovinazzi.
Really? Okay. Well, yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, just, he was obviously in the sport until the end of last year, several years experience. Well heeled in the sport. He would have a lot of experience that he could bring. And I think this was a really telling point that they made is Giovinazzi would be a much better metric to put Mick Schumacher against. So that's more of just it would be nice if kind of situation. But it would be cool to see how Mick stood up to Antonio Giovinazzi. Of course, another super sub of sorts was also mentioned as someone that might come in. But then there were also a couple of, there was I forget his name, but he's F2 talent.
Oscar Piastri, who's the current F2 champion?
Yes. Okay. Yes. Who more than a couple people are annoyed that Zhao got the seat as opposed to him. So there would kind of be some poetic justice to that. But also Pietro Fittipaldi was mentioned, the grandson of Emerson. He is connected to Haas already as a reserve driver.
Right, and he did a Grand Prix, didn't he, back in 2020?
That's right. Mm-hmm. Also, Kevin Magnussen was mentioned.
Kimi Räikkönen in the mix.
Kimi Räikkönen's got too many costume parties booked, so he cannot. But I didn't say his name yet, but Nico Hülkenberg, I kind of want it to be him just because. Just because. It'd be so great if his F1 career just kept being continually extended. There's something about that I would just love.
I can't imagine there'll be a shortage of drivers lining up to talk to Gene Haas if it's confirmed that Nikita's moving on. But it's a poison chalice, isn't it? That seat. I mean, if Haas are going to be running at the back again this year, you're just up against Mick. I mean, I guess it's better than not driving at all, but it's not really where you'd want to be. I mean, when Nico last subbed in, he had a car good enough for. Well, put it on the front row, didn't he? So that's a whole different game, isn't it? Rather than guaranteed back row. But it's a foot in the door, no doubt. You'd have to hope you could blow away Mick and go to bigger and better things. But I mean, let's talk about Haas's performance. I mean, they didn't develop their car last season at all on the basis that they really wanted to focus on the rule change for 22 and. Right now, their pace and reliability doesn't seem to be rewarding them for that effort, and that's hugely worrying.
Yeah,
especially as they've brought in quite a few Ferrari personnel to try and help them move away from the reliance on Dallara and have more internal development. That they can't seem to get themselves off the back end of the grid. I hope that they find some progress here before too long, because it's just not good for them or the sport really to have people that are so far at the back.
Well, I feel like an Achilles heel kind of move to say, we're not developing this car, we're focusing on next year's car. I've never seen that just bear fruit in the way that's intended. You're either a well-funded team or you're not. Do you see what I'm getting at? Like,
yeah.
Ferrari, Mercedes developed their car pretty heavily, and then the next year they come out with a lot of new developments still and keep developing that new car. I mean, just Red Bull, obviously the same way. You know, Christian Horner was interviewed on Beyond the Grid several months back, and he basically said as much. It's like, look, if you want to be a competitive team, you have to be able to develop your current car and build a great new car at the same. You just, it's kind of like a walk and chew gum at the same time kind of a thing.
Yeah, I mean, it has worked in the past, hasn't it? I mean, if you think about Honda back in 2008,
what became the Braun GP car.
Exactly. If that had stayed as a Honda, they basically had switched their attention to the new regulations, and they ended up with a championship-winning car, unfortunately not under their own name, under Braun's name. But that shows that it can work. But the sport's moved on a lot in the last 13 years. And, you know, Haas has shown that their philosophy and approach by maximising the number of parts they buy from an established team can work. But for whatever reason, the performance has really dipped in the last couple of seasons. They need to find a way to turn a corner. I mean, you know, Williams was the last team in that situation, and it looks like they have. They've managed to turn the ship around, and they're getting back to respectability and inching their way back up the grid. And I think, you know, what we want to see is 10 teams that are all pretty competitive. We have no one, you know, streaking out at the front, and we have no one dropping off the back, and that would give us the most entertaining racing that we can hope to get. So hopefully Haas will, you know, use this as an impetus to sort their reliability woes out and find some performance.
Or maybe Haas will become Andretti Grand Prix in 2024. That might not be all bad either.
Well, did you see Michael's comments during the St. Pete Indycar race? He was taken aback by how cool the response was to his interest in joining Formula One. You know, people like Christian Horner and Toto Wolff really weren't very positive about it at all. They talked about dilution of the sport and the revenues, and I guess Zach Brown was a bit more positive and could see that the benefits to the sport. But,
the American, yeah.
And,
about another American getting in the sport, yeah.
And of course, F1 and the FIA haven't even responded to his submission yet, which was entirely predictable. So, yeah, long road ahead yet for Michael to get back into Formula One, which I think is a shame. I can definitely see the benefits. I'd love to see an Andretti entry, and I'd love to see, as we talked about before, some, you know, new thinking and hopefully some different drivers, especially ones that hopefully have grown up here in the US.
Well, yeah, exactly right. And unlike Haas, Andretti has already said absolutely firmly committed. Yes, it would be an American driver in my car, at least one. So that's what just as you and I have talked about many times over the past. It's not this in the background stuff. The fact that America, the United States, actually has a lot of involvement in Formula One. We need an American driver. We need an American team that looks like an American team. And by that, I suppose, I don't mean Bud Light and barbecues, but I do mean...
Yes, you do. Come on.
Well, I wouldn't be opposed to the barbecue part. I'm more of a microbrewery kind of a guy, but, you know, we can work on those details. But barbecue's fantastic, okay? Barbecue's fantastic. I've stated
Absolutely.
it down, and so is iced tea. So that's what I want. I want Snapple or Arizona iced tea. That's what I want as the title sponsor for my American Formula One team. I think this is a great time to actually move to obviously much more American-friendly racing, and that is IndyCar. IndyCar didn't have a test this past weekend. They raced. They went around the road course at St. Petersburg, Florida, several times, and we got a brand new race winner out of it.
We did, yeah. Scott McLaughlin, another New Zealander. Obviously, New Zealanders seem to like Indy cars. Yeah, first win in IndyCar.
It's his second year with Penske, and he definitely started the season off right. This was how Simon Pagenaud got his 2016 championship winning season off to a start. He was struggling at Penske. He jumped in 2016 and just started winning races and went on to win the championship. So Scott McLaughlin's definitely started the season about as good as you can. He won that race from pole position, I should add.
Yeah, well, he was Rookie of the Year last year, so we knew that he found a spiritual home in IndyCars. Definitely up for the task. But yeah, what a way to start. Interesting, it was a race-long battle with Palau, last year's champion. I guess, the whole race split. Some drivers went for 2 stops, some went for 3. Both McLaughlin and Palau went for 2 stops. And just looking at some data here on the critical stop that allowed McLaughlin to hold the lead and ultimately win the race, I guess it all came down to his outlap performance. He was almost a second quicker than Palau on his outlap, on cold tyres. That's impressive. I mean, those things...
Very.
Those Indy cars are tough. They're not allowed tyre warmers. They're tough to drive on cold tyres. It's an unforgiving circuit. A lot of concrete walls around St. Pete.
No power steering either in an Indy car.
Right, that's true. So yeah, that's impressive performance. I mean, I will add that the pit stop was fractionally quicker as well by half a second. So the Penske team did a good job there. But yeah, that outlap was what I mean. They were nose to tail after he came out the pits. So without that performance, he would have lost the lead probably. So,
and it does look like it. Obviously, we're only one race in, but this was Team Penske race winner Scott McLaughlin and Chip Ganassi Racing runner-up Alex Palau right behind him. So it's looking like Penske and Ganassi will be right there yet again, and we'll see how Andretti pairs this weekend, because Andretti's top driver was, in fact, Romain Grosjean, who I believe finished the race 5th at the end. And that was a huge improvement from how he started the weekend. I think this was Friday, when he had a big crash in Friday practice, just running into the back of Takuma Sato.
Yeah, that was a funny incident, wasn't it? Herta was 4th, right? Herta drives for Andretti. No?
Oh, I'm sorry. You're right. So he was not the lead. You're correct. Sorry about that.
But yeah, Andretti 4th and 5th, which they seemed to struggle at times last year, didn't they? I think they did pretty well in St. Pete last year, but they had a bit of an up and down season. So hopefully this bodes well for them to really get in the mix with Ganassi and Penske this season. Yeah,
so just real quick, we'll run through this. Scott McLaughlin won. Alex Palau was 2nd. Will Power, another Penske driver, he finished on the podium in 3rd. Then Colton Herta, you're right, he was the top Andretti guy, and Romain Grosjean was right behind him. And then behind that in 6th was Rinus VeeKay, who is not actually Rinus VeeKay, but his name is Rinus VeeKay as far as we're concerned. And then Graham Rahal, Scott Dixon, Marcus Ericsson, and indeed Takuma Sato finished 10th. Now, where did your favorite driver finish?
I did look out for him, and I know he was qualified in the 20s and finished in the 20s, didn't he? But by all accounts, it was a slightly more respectable performance. In fact, it was
slightly more respectable performance.
Well, he was actually he was pivotal. He was pivotal in the result, wasn't he? Because
he held up
ended
Palau
up blocking
a little bit.
Yeah, exactly. Well, he tried to hold up McLaughlin to assist Palau to allow him to close the gap.
Sorry, yes. I had it exactly backwards. I apologize. Yes.
So he's now able to go fast enough and to keep it, on the black stuff enough that he can help his teammates when he gets lapped.
So we went from a rolling chicane to a useful rolling chicane, is what I'm hearing from you.
Yeah, in the course of a season. So who knows what might happen next year.
Yeah, give him 3 more seasons in IndyCar, and he could be mid-pack. Yeah, it's tough. We're making fun at his expense. He's done quite a lot. This is a big transition from NASCAR to IndyCar, and he is not the youngest driver in the field. So I just have to say once, there's fundamentally a lot of respect for him. At the same time, this will not be the last time I poke fun at him either.
Is he going to run ovals this year?
I believe he was talking about a full season, but that was the big news with Romain. Romain now with Andretti Autosport, he is effectively in Ryan and Hunter Ray's car. He has DHL sponsorship, the whole deal, so he's in yellow. Romain is running the full season. So Romain Grosjean will be at the Indianapolis 500 this year.
Because I think that's the thing that Jimmy should take advantage of. Obviously, he's probably got more experience around ovals than the rest of the field combined, and so why not use that to your advantage and get a few good results for your IndyCar team and sponsors to relieve some of the pressure when you're on road courses. It just doesn't make any sense to me, that, and I'm sure he's explained it, and I just haven't read it, but to me, it's like you've got to give yourself a break and play to your strengths, haven't you, at some point? Yeah, let's hope. I mean, the next race is at Texas, isn't it? Which is the 1.5 mile oval. Maybe
exactly right.
Out there
and it's the same day as the Formula One opener in Bahrain. It's the 20th.
Yeah. So a couple of other results that caught my eye. So Pato O'Ward finished 12th in the McLaren. Newgarden was down in 16th in his Penske, and then Rossi finished 20th for Andretti. So some big names finishing, in the lower half of the order there. And then also there was some interesting performance. I mean, Palou started 10th on the grid. Takuma Sato started 22nd and managed to make it up to 10th. Conversely, Newgarden started 9th. So there was some decent... I mean, I think, obviously the pits shuffled a little bit. There was only one caution flag period, which is unusual at St. Pete. But definitely some passing and some moving up and down the order was possible if you had it hooked up on Sunday, which is good to see because, we definitely got a very competitive grid for this year's IndyCar series. But you want to be able to see racing, don't you? You want to be able to see people moving up or down the order depending on their performance. And definitely that's what we got. So that's good opener for IndyCar.
Absolutely. I just want to make one point about Rossi. He did end up finishing 20th, but he was kind of like, off cycle in pits a bit. He did lead 10 laps of the race, kind of in the middle. So he they made a gamble on pit strategy and it didn't quite work out for him. He was one of the 2 stoppers, by the way.
Rossi, Dixon and O'Ward all, I think, were running 3 stoppers, weren't they? And I think Dixon ended up being the highest placed 3 stopper in 8th. So definitely the 2 stoppers had the strategy right.
But that's my point. Rossi was a 2-stopper, but he was a 2-stopper on a different cycle. Do you see what I'm getting at? Like, yeah. So it's an exciting season coming up in IndyCar. I'm certainly looking forward to that, and very, very happy. I love New Zealand. The bits of New Zealand I've seen and experienced, and the people I've experienced, it's all been positive. It's a great, great place. So I'm certainly happy to have another Kiwi to see competing, and a race winner no less. It's all very, very cool.
Well, it just looks super competitive, doesn't it? I mean, I don't expect he'll dominate this season. I would think that there's going to be a lot of different drivers and teams winning this year, which is what we really want, I think. We want to see... we don't want a Formula One style domination by a couple of drivers, do we? We want to have a good mix and a good battle throughout, and I think that's what IndyCar can give us. Exactly right.
And you talked a little bit about barbecue, or I mentioned it, and you went with it, and I want to tell you my favorite barbecue, and that's Korean barbecue.
Oh, that's controversial.
And hey, guess what? What a lovely segue to my YouTube video that I just did on the Kia Telluride. It is the largest vehicle that Kia and indeed Hyundai sell in the United States. The Hyundai is called the Palisade, but the Kia Telluride definitely has different styling to the Hyundai, and it was a very interesting car to test. It has a lot of positives. It's a very competitive price. So here's a fun little thing. Now, these cars this isn't apples to apples, but I recently tested a Chevrolet Tahoe. The cheapest Tahoe you can buy is $51,000. The Kia Telluride I had was about best as you can get, effectively top of the line. It was the SX, which is the top trim, with the Prestige package on top of that, and that out the door was under $50,000.
Yeah, they've always been known for the value for money, but yet they have good styling, great quality these days, and they're pretty compelling products in their own right. I think it's fair to say, which is why they keep increasing their market share in the US and other parts of the world. But I'm still reeling from your assertion that Korean barbecue is the best barbecue you can get. I mean, I know you have a family dimension to this that may force you to have to say that. But I've had good Korean barbecue and I've had awful, really terrible Korean barbecue because it very much depends on the meat that they're barbecuing. I do like the little grills that they have integrated into the table. That's a really neat idea.
Yeah.
But pork barbecue is probably one of the worst meals I've ever consumed. Beef barbecue, pretty good.
Well, there you
still
go.
Still not as good as good old fashioned American smoky barbecues, in my opinion.
Yes. Well, as long as I'm still in this house, I have to respectfully disagree. We'll leave the food discussion for another podcast. Maybe we'll have to have a test. Maybe we'll have to do a comparison test back to back. But one more announcement. We are now going to have the podcasts available on YouTube. So if you go to YouTube and you search FW Cars, we have a separate YouTube channel up, and it now officially has 2 episodes, and it's going to be a regular thing. So please tell all your friends and help spread the word. That would be wonderful. I'd appreciate that.
Very cool.
And I would like to thank you for listening. Please take a moment to review us on iTunes or on YouTube or whatever platform you get our podcast. Please leave comments on the episode of your choice by going to funwithcars.com. As always, I can be reached at feedback@funwithcars.com. Tweet us at fun_with_cars. And check out our Facebook page at facebook.com/FWCars. Chris, what an afternoon. What a conversation. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I'm Robin Warner. Goodbye.